services online, how we can develop our human resources in ICT field, because we are developing 4 pillars to achieve digital Bangladesh. That is the core ideas for achieving the digital Bangladesh vision: human resource development, ICT industry, internet for all, and e-governance. So we have been able to set up 5,765 digital delivery centers across the country. So today is the day we are celebrating 9 years of establishing our Union Digital Centers. 10 years back, on this day, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina established this unique service delivery center, and she took the bottom-up approach. And that is why we have been able to available our 600 digital services online, and we have set up our own data center. When you are talking about the data privacy and data protection, so we have that capacity to store our own data, all of our government services we are hosting at our government data center. And we have been able to enact and approved our Digital Security Act last year. And under the Digital Security Act, we have been able to establish our Digital Security Agency, Computer Incident Response Team. Under the Digital Security Act, we are awareing our people how to make them safe and secure in digital space. But at the same time, we are very, very sincere and serious about their data privacy and data protection. Because we believe that we need to encourage our people to use the internet. They should utilize this digital technology to get all the government services at their doorstep, at their fingertips. But at the same time, government should protect citizens' data. And that is why under the Digital Security Act, we are securing our citizens' data. We are protecting their privacy right. And we are also collaborating with our neighboring countries and the international organizations and platforms, how we can secure and how we can be capable to protect our digital space. So this is how we are balancing. We are utilizing the digital technologies for better use for the citizens. At the same time, we are securing our digital space.
So let me ask you one more aspect, since you've mentioned the word security. And you've also identified privacy as one of your fundamental objectives of the Act. How are you responding to the phenomenon where people are getting extremely radicalized online? You know, you're seeing violence and radicalization that is, and it's not a challenge for Bangladesh, it's a global challenge which requires global action. How is Bangladesh protecting itself from making sure its young population does not fall prey to this tendency that we are witnessing around the world? And where I come from, we are facing the similar challenge. And no one has yet discovered the silver bullet. How is Bangladesh attempting to respond to this challenge?
First of all, we believe in secular society. That is our main principle. And Honorable Prime Minister always encouraging our young students and teachers to censor about these terrorist activities. And after the Holy Artisan incident, and in last 2 years, we have been able to very active against the terrorist activities. And Honorable Prime Minister organized digital public meetings. Millions of people joined on that online digital meeting. And Honorable Prime Minister personally, directly, she talked with the teachers, the imams, and the students, and the parents directly. And she actually tried to make them understand that we should protect ourselves from these terrorist activities for achieving our economic growth and our digital Bangladesh vision. And that is how Honorable Prime Minister inspired us to act against the terrorist activities and this kind of online awareness program, and also in our 170,000 educational institutions, our education ministry, ICT ministry, local government ministries, they work together as a team. And also we work with law enforcing agencies because we are imposing strong laws and we are taking under the justice all the criminals. But at the same time, we are focusing on how we can aware our future generation to protect them from all these terrorist activities.
I think that's a very remarkable effort, and I think something we should be sharing with the much broader South Asian region as a way of responding to, engaging with the youth, with schools and teachers, with madrasas and religious leaders. I think that's a whole of community approach to response. Ankil, let me come to you on this. In a sense, like I mentioned, this is not a national challenge. Of course, it implicates nations and it affects national security, but this is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
Now, global enterprises such as the one that you have worked with for a long time have to come up with something more robust and creative, right? How do you ensure that regions, communities, enterprises, countries and communities are eventually on the same side when we tackle it?
So let me try and respond to you, Samir, in two ways. One, of course, taking off from where Honorable Minister talked about in terms of how do you deal with radicalization in society, and we've seen some very drastic consequences of that. I do want to talk about what are the kind of the global norms and also the practices which the global US tech industry is taking in this particular direction. And specifically also with regard to Bangladesh, I do want to share about certain things which we have been doing. So if you look at Facebook, the Facebook platform group of companies, what we've been doing is that we essentially have a 3 E's policy, which is essentially enforcement, second is education, and the last E is essentially figuring out ways in terms of looking at smart regulation, right? So these are the 3 areas that we are applying ourselves to in this particular area. If you look at counter-terrorism and our efforts in that direction, we have set up this global platform, which is GIFCT, Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism.
Which we are hosting in Delhi
Which we are
next
hosting
week.
in Delhi next week, as you're aware, and it's a South Asia forum. So there will be many people from this region who will be participating in that. Sort of participant members in that includes a lot of US tech firms. Twitter, Google, Instagram, everybody is a member of that particular group where they're sharing hashes of terrorist content, which gets taken down even before, they go viral. We ourselves have taken, just this half, we've taken down more than 12 million pieces of terrorist content before anyone saw it. So the AI tools are developing well, which are getting applied. There's a lot more sharing and incident sharing protocols which are being activated amongst these tech firms so that this kind of material does not go viral. Recently, Dropbox also joined the GIFCT as a platform. So you're seeing that there's this general recognition that at a technology level, at a platform enforcement level, there are things which we can do so that this type of material does not go viral online. The second element is really the education aspect and what can we do together in terms of creating an environment of counter-speech, counter-narratives. So working with the minister and officials in his ministry as well as UNDP, we started this contest, a digital khichdi, which essentially means that how do you develop a tolerant society? Getting entries from participating students in colleges to create bite-sized content which can go viral, and this essentially is a contest. But this at least starts a conversation in society that what is the kind of society we want, what are the counter-narratives which we want out there. The third element is really, what is the kind of regulation which needs to be there at a scalable global level in terms of shaping norms. And there, I think there is general recognition that intermediary liability laws, legislation, the notice and takedown provisions, when it comes to terrorist content, there's a whole lot of proactive stuff which industry is already doing, and this is a evolution. There's a lot more which we want to talk to governments about, talk to civil society actors about, researchers, because I don't think so everything is known in this particular domain. There's a lot of things in terms of how do terrorist organizations recruit, how do they change their identity, like AQIS today will turn into something else tomorrow. How do we look at detection? Those are the kind of things where research will be very useful. So it really is multi-stakeholder in terms of looking at all of this. But to come back to your point in terms of how can you create norms which is more scalable across a range of countries, look, in terms of content regulation, we've already gone on record saying, as a company, we've gone on record saying that this is an area of smart regulation, and we have to work together collectively with governments and with civil society in terms of designing such formats of content regulation.
So, Auntie, let me ask you here. Your title says Public Policy Director, Facebook, India, South and Central Asia. That's a vast geography. Now, do you see harmonization of norms or regulations in your own beat?
Yes, we do. So, for instance, you know, if you look at intermediary liability, the Manila Principles do provide a framework in terms of what that harmonization should look like. And the principle there is notice and takedown system. Like, users can report to us, law enforcement agencies can report to us, and they have special protocols for doing that. Both in terms, law enforcement agencies can report both content as well as in criminal investigations, basic subscriber information. And this gets reported to all agencies. And then we comply following appropriate due processes. Privacy is another area where harmonization as a principle is a very active principle. The defining governance framework there is a notice and consent architecture. When, you know, sort of when you sign up to a service, an internet service, the terms of use in that very clearly lay down the consent provisions. So that is kind of a global norm, if you can say. So I think national legislations, as they're getting written out and built out, these are the kind of principles which they are looking at. In our region, I think the two, in the privacy domain, the two areas which I think has been kind of a benchmark for a lot of countries to look at is the EPIC privacy principles. And also, you know, they have looked at the Japan-sponsored DFFT model network, which you know was a big part of the G20 discussions as well. The data free flow and trust model, which again talks about what are the kinds of national legislations which should be developed, which drive trust in the platforms, but at the same time laying down appropriate mechanisms for enforcement.
Sabir, if you just allow me to just add 2 points to actually respond to the Aki, what she mentioned about this privacy policy. You know that a social media platform like Facebook, they have their own privacy policy, which is not
necessarily consistent.
Yes, not fit for Bangladesh, or because they are talking about norms, but you know that there is a global norms what they are following, but we have some of our local norms. So you were talking about regions, religious, and the culture. So you should actually consider all these areas when you are applying your company policy for different countries. So you have to customize your privacy policy, because you know that recently we have experienced a very bad situation in one of our districts. So four person actually died because one person's Facebook ID was hacked, and he actually reported to the police station. But before getting any solution from the police station, that hacker actually posted a fake content on that page and Facebook account, and the mass unrest followed. So we have to consider all these consequences, because you know that if they are not actually considering our local culture and the laws, the peoples are actually losing their lives. So we have to.
No, I think that's an important point, Ankit. Let me pose that to you. I think he's raised a very important point.
Yeah.
And we hear this in India as well. We've heard this in Europe and other parts as well. That do your global practices respond to local contexts? Is it contextual, and how are you going to make them contextual is a challenge for you. It's $1 million question for you.
So we recognize this, and I can talk more about the Bhola incident, which you mentioned, and sort of we completely aware of that incident, and we worked with your agencies also in terms of curbing the spread of misinformation online. I think there are two aspects. One is that as a country matures in terms of using digital tools, we just need to invest a lot more in terms of education on things like two-factor authentication, and then making sure that we kind of we are also thinking about this, whether we should make that a mandatory authentication requirement in order to use our service. So that's something which we are thinking about, because that provides an added layer of insulation, and also doing a lot of user education so that know how to keep their accounts secure.
So cyber hygiene.
Pure cyber hygiene education, that is one. The second point which you talked about on the content moderation side, in terms of catering to local nuances and also cultural sensitivities, which I think is more or less at a fundamental level pretty uniform in the South Asia region, because I think we are, in terms of our cultural norms, there's a lot of similarity in the region as such. We're extremely sensitive to that, which is why we think that this is an area of co-regulation or smart regulation, where, for instance, this is very well established in the UN principles by Frank LaRue, who's sort of the human rights rapporteur there, that if nexus to harm is established clearly by a certain type of speech, it could be hate speech of a certain type, it could be extreme religious speech of a certain type, which borders on hate speech and then leads to, sort of real-world violence. Those kind of material or content will get taken off our platform. So we are extremely cognizant of this. We take this very seriously. We do understand that in terms of local nuance, that has a big role to play in terms of how do we adjust application of our enforcement policies in instances such as the one which you mentioned.
Yeah.
Responding time is very important, you know that.
Correct.
Because when you are talking in front of the public, it can actually spread by 200 to 300 people or 500 people. But when you are online and you are boosting that content, because I would like to actually differ with Akidash in some areas, because you know that there is a policy of Facebook that they cannot actually stop or block the account until the boosting is stopped. So I don't know why this is, because you know that when the content is harmful for the society, and it can actually create the unrest in a country, but why they are not stopping that?
So you've
content?
raised two important points, Minister.
And
one
also,
is the technical practice.
Exactly.
Where,
and also in the research and development areas, because you know that worldwide 400 million people speak in Bangla. But when you are talking about this, like identifying the hate speech in Bangla, we have to work together how we can actually develop all this artificial intelligence, how we can actually detect all this hate speech, what are actually in Bangla. So we have that agency in Bangladesh. We have National Telecom
and you have the
Monitoring
size.
Center.
You have the size to invest in
So
it.
we cannot do it by human beings, but we have to use the AI.
So what we have done is we have set the agenda for the meeting between the two of you. Pretty much respond to the technical question and to the cultural question, and Anki will work with you on that. But you did mention the word artificial intelligence. I will quickly move to Ambassador Gill with that particular segue. So artificial intelligence today, and now let's look at the positive side of technology. I think we are today at the threshold of being able to respond to illness, disease, and health questions like never before. We can respond to some of the most pressing challenges on agriculture and rural sectors like never before. We are on the threshold of changing our quality of life using predictive technologies. You, of course, have a journey of a diplomat who is engaged on technology quite intimately, from the old world technologies of arms control to the new world technologies of digital AI and lethal autonomous weapon systems and more frontier domains. How do you see AI and the future connectivity questions, future access to solutions questions, sitting in Geneva where you do sit, where you're working on this very ambitious project to change the face of healthcare forever?
Thank you very much, Samir. It's an honor to be here, pleasure to be here in Bangladesh. The way I see AI is it's the democratization of expert systems. The previous phase of digitalization was all about ICT tools and also the generation of data that helped us in a very generic way. With AI, we can move to the next stage where what only oil drillers knew or can be democratized, can be made accessible to larger numbers of people. I also see AI as artisanal. So many people see it as something that only Facebook, Amazon, and Google can practice with their large data sets. I, on the other hand, feel that it is more jugaad, as we say in this part of the world. It's artisanal. It allows a brown-collar worker, a farmer, to also put his or her expertise at the service of solving a problem. What I worry about most, apart from the content-related and the security and privacy-related issues that the previous speakers have referred to, the coming deep fakes, the hacking of your digital avatars, which a surgeon might be using, or hacking of autonomous vehicles and so on, is the divide issue here, the exclusion issue here. If we do not work now on making this accessible to the youth of tomorrow, we could end up creating this divide between problem owners and problem solvers, experts who come in and say, let me tell you what to do with your data and what to do with your problems. So this is critical in two areas in particular. One is health, you mentioned that at the outset. The other is finance. So inclusive health and inclusive finance are perhaps the two most transformative areas for the application of data and AI-driven technologies.
And how do you see the governance frameworks emerging? Are countries collaborating on this? Do you see a zero-sum approach where companies and certain geographies are still wanting to make maximum benefit and extract maximum value for themselves? Or are you beginning to see that this is a digital public good in the making and countries and communities and enterprises are willing to create solutions that are available to everyone to use?
So the picture is mixed. There is some budding collaboration, and in the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation, this is a report, I would commend this to everyone. We took a 360-degree view, looked at experience on the ground in India, China, Africa, elsewhere, and came up with some examples of what we call digital cooperation. This is not about digital technologies alone, it's about the analog world meeting the digital and collaborating around that. But we also saw a lot of areas in which collaboration is woefully inadequate. The content issue, the response time issue, those are a couple of examples. But the key to a future in which everyone can enjoy the fruits of these technologies, to development transformation, not only the leapfrogging types, but the reimagining type of transformation, is getting the governance right. In the SG's panel, we came up with 3 models of governance because there's no silver bullet, and each country, each geography would have to discover governance for itself. But there is a how-to map in the sense of what are the values that a particular society, a particular set of players holds dear. And then what is it that you're using this for? Often we have tech thrown at problems without realizing what the problem needs. So reflection about what is it that we're trying to do, and then eventually collaborating, using the technology as an opportunity, not so much as a tool. And I would like to say that in this region, there is a tremendous opportunity because since the base is very low, there is an absence of everything from trained doctors to trained data scientists. We have an opportunity to get the collaboration right and get the governance right. Just take the marine resources around the Bay of Bengal region. So if we could have 3 governance stacks, if you will, to take a tech term, one around data related to ownership. Fractional ownership can now be counted because of digitalization. So ownership of the negative externalities, who's polluting where, and ownership of the asset creation around the SDG related goals to remove those externalities. And then if we could have another governance pipeline which is related to the opportunity. Data not being hoarded, data not being seen as an extractive resource, oil or data mining or what have you, but rather data in flow, data in use to create business cases around that. And finally, the governance around accountability. So data related to accountability. If we could create the infrastructure of tomorrow in this community around these new data pipelines, which sit on top of the tech layer and the social and e-commerce layers that we've got used to, but this new emerging layer of data infrastructure that's where we need to build the infrastructure, the roads and the ports of tomorrow. The foundations are here, the Aadhaar in India or the CRVS work that's been done in Bangladesh. So we need to create the piping between them and the responsible uses around them so that we can move from this misuse aspect, that's very important, to address the misuse aspect as well.
That's very clever. So, Damien, I'm going to come to you. You've heard the three speakers. All of them have spoken about content, stroke, data. We have discussed that in the context of opportunities to respond to challenges, SDGs. We have heard them in terms of misuse and creating vulnerabilities or exploiting vulnerabilities in society. As someone who's engaged on the question of privacy for some time, do you think we are anywhere closer today to finding a way of managing this trilemma of economic growth, national security, and individual privacy?
Well, Samir, allow me to start by congratulating BIS and ORF on this global dialogue. Just like the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said this morning, I look forward to a regular holding of this dialogue. I'd also like to congratulate the Honorable Minister Palak for the passage last year of the Digital Security Act, which is really an important step in regulating the use of these and abuse of these digital technologies, right? But to answer your question, in today's data-driven economy, privacy has become the proxy for trust. So let me explain, right? Whether you're a tourist checking into a hotel, or a student accessing a website, or a businessman going into a bank or a hospital, you're making a judgment call, right? Is this organization someone that I can trust with my data? Can I rely on them to protect my data? And if there's trust, then I do business with them. But if there's no trust, then there's no deal. And so we have to be aware of these rights, these basic rights of ours, to be informed what our data is going to be used for, how it's going to be secured, who it's going to be shared with. Because the key question for many of us is, who do I know who to trust? How do I know that this bank, this hospital, this government agency can be trusted? And there are signs that we need to look out for. On the flip side, if you're a hospital or a bank or a government agency, the question you need to answer is, how do I show that I can be trusted? And of course, there are many ways to do this. One is to simply have a privacy notice in Bangla as well as in English, clearly stating what the data is going to be used for, who it's going to be shared with, how long it's going to be kept. And you also have to inform the data subjects of their rights to access in an electronic format or a portable format, if possible, their rights to have that data corrected or removed, and even the right to file a complaint if one of their rights has been violated. And it's very important to state who that complaint would go to. In other words, does your organization have a data protection officer? And so having many of these elements present would help data subjects make that judgment call, whether or not you can be protected. Now, not many businesses are going to do this voluntarily because there are certain costs involved.
Correct.
And that's where legislation comes in. And it's not too late. For example, Thailand. When I bring up the example of Thailand...
Let me just ask you, I mean,
Sure.
I want to know about Thailand, but let me also problematize what you're just saying by one more additional information point. All trade arrangements, be it regional or larger like the TPP, original TPP and the new TPP, they all look at data regimes to enable commerce and trade, not necessarily to protect rights and privacy. So now you should give me the Thailand example, but also think about RCEP and others, where what you're just telling us perhaps may have missed their attention of the scripters.
Well, because we've talked about norms, no? And actually there are two sets of norms that we're talking about. One are the social-political norms, which deal with surveillance, human dignity, right? Free will, and the right to privacy. And then there's that second set of norms, the economic and trade norms, which deal with surveillance capitalism and non-tariff trade barriers. And so there are norms factories which are coming out with these. And it would be quite good for Bangladesh to be involved in order to learn from what's happening and not waste resources by reinventing the wheel. Anki talked about two norms factories already. One is APEC, which has something called Cross-Border Privacy Rules, or CBPR. The other one, of course, is the Osaka Track, which was launched by Prime Minister Abe at the G20. And both of these are actually still evolving. Because the APEC principles were developed in 2011. CBPR came up at around that time. But even the architects of the CBPR have realized that a 2.0 needs to be developed, because there have been advances in GDPR, for example. And I'm sure that your countries would be invited as observers if you would like to. In fact, maybe you may even see an announcement pretty soon from the next APEC meeting that CBPR will be opened up to non-APEC member economies, including Brazil, India, for example. The other norms factory, which is the Osaka Track, as you know, there are 24 countries that have signed this, but there were objections from India and Indonesia and South Africa. And so this has actually now been tied to the WTO. And so I think that it's still in the process of evolving, and definitely if Indo-Pacific community can be represented in that dialogue, then so much the better.
So let me, I'm going to request those who want to come in at this stage and ask questions to walk towards the mic and keep your questions precise and only one, and do introduce yourself.
Yeah.
I can see a gentleman
and
here.
while waiting, you wanted me to tell you
But
about Thailand.
But even as you line up, I want you to complete your point.
No, so Thailand, which you had asked me to mention, I brought it up because they are a member of BIMSTEC and ASEAN as well. Right? And so it may be a good example for you to look at. They have launched their Personal Data Protection Act in May of this year, and it will take effect in May of next year. So that would be a good example of a country imposing obligations on data controllers and data processors, telling them that they have these obligations to uphold the rights of the data subjects, to implement data protection measures, to report a breach. For example, if the data has been breached, you have a fiduciary responsibility to let the data subjects know that they could possibly harm, and give them some advice on what they need to do.
Excellent. So yes, please introduce yourself and pose the question. Can someone turn on the mic, please?
Can you hear me? Yes. So first of all, I'd just like to commend the...
Introduce yourself.
I'm Omran Chaudhry. I work in the Amira and Amir Law Associates. I work in the legal sector, and I also study technology law. Firstly, I just quickly commend the success of the Bangladesh Submarine Cable Company, which is now providing bandwidth not just within Bangladesh, but to other countries in the region. I think that's a good example of a digital community. The question is, should we enshrine digital rights in law? Is it, for example, in France, we have the Digital Republic Act, where we have the right to be forgotten, the right to access and rectification, and the rights to self-determination. These rights are being enshrined in law. Should we look at that model, or well, we should be careful not to follow, of course, the Great Firewall of China? That's it.
Yeah, you want to come in, Christoph?
Yes, I'm Chris. I'm Zalewski. I with the Berlin Institute. But
We don't have mics your height.
Sorry.
You'll have to bend a little.
Krzysztof Zalewski from Poland. I work with the Boehm Institute currently, but I used to work with the Fundamental Rights Agency. And our agency in early 2013-14 has been quite instrumental in drafting also the GDPR. And here comes my question. Can you evaluate this general data protection regulation in the EU? Is it applicable to the countries in the region? To what extent? And what should we have done differently? And what would you do differently?
So is GDPR compatible to South Asia? Is
Yes.
that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Good afternoon. My name is Sakar Purasani. I work with an organization called Karkhana. We work on technology education, mostly in Nepal, recently in Bangladesh, and a little bit in India as well. My question sort of builds on what Ambassador Gill said earlier about inclusivity. Recently, when we've been looking at technology education, particularly at very basic levels, we're finding that it's quite easy and there's a lot of will to invest in, say, the infrastructure required to do this better in an inclusive way. But preparing proper technology teachers in the South Asian context is a huge bottleneck, right? So I'm wondering if there have been any frameworks, discussions, any thoughts around how to tackle this challenge, because technology education is like building basic infrastructure. It pays off 10, 15 years from now.
thank you. I think go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Barrister Harunur Rashid, DIG, Bangladesh Police. So, what I want to say is, I would like to draw the attention of public policy advisor of Facebook, present here. So, first of all, our State Minister of ICT, actually, what he said, first of all, I want to reinforce with him because, the Facebook policy, maybe it is global standard policy, but it may not be responsible locally because one always doesn't fit all. So, with very specific example, as our minister was telling about the Bola incident. Of course, Bola incident, after the incident, then actually we got the information from Facebook that we asked for, that we requested for. But the other incident, like in Chittagong, where actually we asked for information and the Facebook came up with the question that where's the documents from the court. But for the prevention, of course, we don't have any court document because prevention, we works on the basis of intelligence, advanced intelligence. So in that case, if they ask for like court documents or any, legal instruments, then we'll be in trouble. So it is not the country, it's not the region. It depends on the people themselves, actually, their background, culture, their, society, social aspects, and also the reality. So if if the Facebook, they consider the socio-economic aspect or social aspect here in Bangladesh, if they compare it with any European country or USA, then they will be mistaken. Because, the Facebook, of course, I think Bangladesh is their second largest revenue earning area. So, of course, they should put more emphasis on how to, use the, safe use of Facebook here. So, as because, our security is first. So, that's our concern as a law enforcement practitioner. I express my concern and, of course, request policy advisor, public policy advisor, so that she should take the initiative to customize their policy for Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final intervention for this session, before we close it, and I'm going to come to you for your final. I'm listing the questions, I'll repeat them. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Pranu Bayene from Ethiopia, IT expert and cybersecurity expert. Could you please tell us the paradox between information privacy, the anonymity of users on the social media, as well as the national security, the cyber attack? There are many paradoxes. When you think of privacy of information, then the citizens and the national security will be also affected. Thank you very much.
I think he raises a very interesting, so I'm going to repeat the questions. We have one question on enshrining digital rights, and I would like Ambassador Gill and Minister Palak to try and respond to that question. Is it time to rethink our constitutions and enshrine digital rights within them? Like we did land rights and other rights in the earlier avatars of national contracts. The second is a very interesting question, and perhaps Anki and both Damien can respond to this, is on while it's all good to talk about technical education and building awareness and capabilities in cyber hygiene, where are the teachers? How do you create and invest in building the teachers who can make technology safe for those who use it? We have a question from the DIG on the perverse incentives of building businesses versus social harmony, and is that something that companies are beginning to rectify? I think that's the question he raised. And finally, I think our friend from Ethiopia actually asked two questions in the same question. One is the dynamic between anonymity and national security. But on the other hand, he also said that securing an individual is the building block to national security. And I think, again, Ambassador Gill and the Minister can begin to respond to that. So I'll come to you last, sir. I want you to have the last word. I will start with Ambassador Gill.
On the enshrining of new digital rights, I am a bit of a conservative. I think the laws are there. You need to reinterpret them in the light of the digital transformations. And there are examples from around the world. You have the Indian Supreme Court's judgment that brought in this aspect of privacy into the discussion around the right to life. You have the UK example, where the existing notion of duty of care for social media, for restaurants, public spaces, is being extended to social media. There are discussions around what does human dignity mean in the age of AI and robotics. So elderly care, if you don't want to be lifted up by a robotic arm and put on a toilet seat, you know, how do you handle that? Putting in new laws would burden the existing analog systems that work on those laws. So the extension, the building up of understandings and common understandings around how these challenges should be dealt with under existing laws and institutions, that should be a priority. Some cases, maybe we would need new laws, but very limited number of cases. And I want to quickly mention the GDPR issue. I think GDPR is not applicable to this region, but it's an important step that has made people sit up and think about these issues. Architecture, which is GDPR plus, I would say. Yeah. UK also, GDPR plus. There are issues in the GDPR regime around ease of doing business and other issues where, you know, the burden is so much that you just tick everything. So there's box ticking, and the actual protection sometimes suffers. So I think there is an opportunity to build on the GDPR experience and do something that's more about empowerment that works from the bottom up.
Yeah. So to answer the question of Christoph, I think GDPR is relevant all over the world. I think people are beginning to take adaptations of that to their own contexts. I mean, that's the point I think that you were making in terms of our own Indian experience to the GDPR. Damien.
All right, so I belong to this association called the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And one of our main thrusts is certification. And so I think that's where, and it's an important piece of this education aspect, because you want to make sure that whoever's going out and teaching about privacy implementation and privacy rights is himself or herself certified and has a certain stock of knowledge that can be benchmarked. And so that's one of the key missions of the IAPP. But beyond that, there's this new degree that's being offered in many parts of the world called privacy engineering. And that, I think, will be the key profession in the next 10, 15 years, being a privacy engineer. And so I would also recommend to colleges and universities to start looking at the curriculum for that particular course. And who knows, in the future, the Indo-Pacific community could become the center of excellence or the source of talent for privacy engineers around the world. Right? Now, I'd like to address also a little bit the digital rights and the GDPR, right? And this may be a little controversial statement, but I'm just going to say that in 10 years, everyone will have to comply to GDPR.
Correct.
Why? Because there's going to be a gradual movement towards merging. Because companies don't want to have to
Multiple
comply,
duties, yeah.
yes, to this regime and another regime over there. But what you'll notice is that GDPR was put in place to facilitate movement of goods in the European Union. CBPR, trade within APEC. And so you have to ask yourself, what is behind these economic norms? Because that's actually the basic underlying principle that we're trying to achieve here. And those are the norms, as I said, the socio-political norms that are discussed at the ICDPPC. That's the International Conference of Data Protection and Privacy Commissioners. This year they met in Albania. Next year they're meeting in Mexico. It's an annual meeting. And there are over 120 members. And India, for example, is an observer working towards membership status. And so I would invite the other members of the Indo-Pacific community to also start coming in as observers. Another European institution which is working on the socio-political norms is the Council of Europe. They have something called the Convention 108. 55 countries have joined, have acceded to this treaty. The Philippines and Japan have observer status. And so any country can actually go and join their meetings. It's twice a year in Strasbourg, France. And a third group, which is more of a subgroup, is the APPA Forum, Asia Pacific Privacy Authorities Forum. They meet twice a year. The meeting this year will be in the Philippines in December. So if you're interested to attend, I can help to get you an invitation. Currently, there are 13 countries that are members of this forum, but that membership is looking to expand quite rapidly, especially with ASEAN being invited to also be participants in this year's forum. So again, you're welcome to be an observer, whether it's the ICDPPC or the COE or the APPA forum. Please let me know if you'd like more information on any of these.
Thank you, Anki. Anki, over to you.
So I would like to respond by the language point which Minister also said, and I think the cultural nuance point which was raised. এটা বাংলা না বলে পারছি না বাংলা ভাষার প্রতি প্রগাঢ় টান আমাদের অনেকের আছে so I just want to make sure that basically translated that means that there are a lot of us within the company who have an intense affinity for the language. We also have experts who have linguistic capability working in our content operations team, which assess reported content and then take appropriate actions in terms of either removal or working with the law enforcement agencies to address objectionable content or harm-causing content, content which promote violent extremism. In terms of casework, I think we are in constant dialogue. There are now established protocols between our law enforcement outreach teams and the agencies, appropriate agencies over here in Bangladesh. We are also looking forward to working with the local CERT, which you have established under the DSA Act last year, and institutional, sort of both in terms of institutional maturity, growth, capacity building is something which we are very invested in. We would definitely like to be in active dialogue with the Bangladesh CERT as it starts applying itself to these questions. I also think what could be helpful if we could have forums where our technical teams and law enforcement, in particular law enforcement teams, sit down with your agencies and we could have training sessions in terms of what is the objective standard in terms of writing up a demand when it comes to us. Because
but I think the training has to be both ways.
It has to be both ways in terms of our learning, but also in terms of talking to, because what we've seen in field operations, what we often see is that there is a qualitative difference, between agency to agency. When we get an inbound in terms of request, whether you have cited the right provision of the law, whether the right application has been made, whether the agency which has requested for it, whether it has the legal authority or not, we have to make sure that we are doing a due diligence in all of these factors. These are legitimate reasons in terms of review, right, for a cause of action, even on our part. Once we do that, then we make appropriate disclosures. And as, the gentleman was saying that in the Bhola incident, once that became, we got that input from the agencies over here, we leaned in and worked very constructively in terms of finding a solution. But longer term, in terms of sustainability, we'll have to work together to make sure that there are counter narratives also which are being shaped, because some of this is always going to be reactive, because nobody wants bad things to happen on the internet. We certainly don't want it. And our effort every time is to minimize the bad. But some of this, you cannot rule it out. It will be reactive, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are making investment in terms of the institutional engagements which we have, in terms of sharing of information as to what is the kind of inbound request which needs to come, which helps our processing time, and there'll be then faster turnaround time. That is all I can say. But in terms of linguistic capacity, we are doing a lot. We can do a lot more, and I'd be keen to have that conversation.
Minister, you have the final word. And you can respond to the questions and to what others have said.
Thank you. Actually, I have noted all the questions. I just want to respond to the first question, digital right, how we can actually ensure the right to the digital space. Under the ICT division, we are taking internet to all, and we follow the EEE policies as a principle to take internet to the village level and to take the internet for all. So the first is availability, then affordability, and third is awareness. Because when you are taking internet to everywhere, up down to the village level, so you have to make internet affordable. Otherwise, the general mass people will not use the internet. And the third is awareness. What we are talking about, the first thing is awareness, then capacity building of the institutions. Because otherwise, you cannot actually make this internet positive for the mass people. So we consider access to internet as the sixth basic needs of a citizen, because you know that food, clothing, and shelter, after all this, so we consider as a sixth basic right to use the internet. And if you talk about the GDPR, we are also following the European Union standards inside our institution, and also we studied about all the cybersecurity laws, what enacted by the European member countries, and also we follow this European Union standard when we are introducing any act or law or any policies. So we follow strategy first, policy second, and law third. Because when you are talking about artificial intelligence or IoT or any of the emerging technologies, we try to develop strategy first, then we want to take policy to the users, and third, law. We don't want to be as a regulator's role, we want to play as a facilitator's role in this digital space. The third, the information privacy, freedom of speech. Definitely, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is very serious about keeping the freedom of speech as a fundamental right of any citizen. But at the same time, we are very serious about protecting our citizens' respect, and because we believe that freedom of speech does not mean that you can talk anything what can harmful for the other citizens. So we have to take this in our strategy, and we have to consider all these things. And that is why we are developing the data policy. So we are categorizing the data, which are like open data and the data you cannot share. So when you are categorizing data, so that you can make data processable. Correct. Then you can use the data. You can use data as a tool for introducing new business models. So this is how our government taking technologies to the next level. And also, I would like to thank our Facebook Public Policy Director for Asia Pacific, for offering us to do some research work in terms of language, Bangla language development in ICT area. Definitely we're working with Facebook for a long time, because when we started working together on that time 6 years back, our Facebook users number was only 3 million. Now it actually increased into 30 million. So I hope that Facebook, they will think that Bangladesh is the emerging market, and also in Indo-Pacific area we have more than half of the population of the world. So we should focus on the Indo-Pacific area for our future investment, and we should do more research work in the emerging technologies area. And if we would work together, we can utilize technologies, utilize for the betterment of our citizen in our Indo-Pacific area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think in your last intervention, there's a message for all of us. 30 million Facebook users, but many more internet users in the future, a very large digital community in India, probably the world's largest digital cohort is going to be emerging from the Bay of Bengal and Indo-Pacific. Having said this, I think the challenge for us sitting here today must be that in 10 years' time, capitals around the world should be talking about the South Asian Code of Digital Rights or the South Asian Code of Digital Coordination. It is now incumbent on us to build the communities that write the rules that others will emulate. And my friend from Poland should be asking the question, that is the BIMSTEC code relevant for the EU? And I think in 10 years' time, as Amandeep creates solutions through AI, the future of the management of AI systems and the AI ecosystems must be devised in this region. So please join me in applauding the panel for their fantastic contribution. And don't go away. We have now with us a very rather mischievous person we have got from Delhi, and I'm scared the DIG is here, but he will let him go back. He's an ethical hacker. He's going to actually show you something about keeping yourself safe online. Jitin Jain, please come and join us. He works in this sector, and he's going to give a small demonstration of what it means. Jitin, you don't mind if he keeps sitting here, right? Okay.